The marriage counselor's office smelled like vanilla candles and broken dreams. I sat there, watching my wife Selena flip her perfectly styled blonde hair while explaining to Dr. Martinez how I was emotionally unavailable if I wanted to be lectured about my shortcomings. I could have saved the $150 and called my mother-in-law. Nick seems distant lately, Selena said, her manicured fingers drumming against her designer purse. He doesn't appreciate the effort I put into our relationship. I almost laughed. The only effort Selena put into anything these days involved choosing which yoga pants showed off her ass best at the gym. But I kept my mouth shut and nodded like the good husband I was supposed to be. Nick, how do you feel about what Selena just shared? Dr. Martinez asked, pen poised over his notepad, like he was about to write the next great American novel. I think my wife has a lot of insights, I said, especially about things she's passionate about, like fitness. She's really thrown herself into that lately. Selena's cheeks flushed pink. Interesting. The truth was, I'd been noticing things. Little things that added up to a big, ugly picture. The late nights at work events that never seemed to involve anyone from her marketing firm. The new lingerie that I never got to see her wear. The way she clutched her phone like it contained state secrets. But the real kicker was the water bottle. 3 days ago, I'd found it in her gym bag while looking for my phone charger. Pink lipstick on the rim. The problem? Selena only wore red. Always red. It's my signature, she'd say, like she was some kind of movie star instead of a middle manager at a mid-tier advertising agency. So whose pink lipstick was on my wife's water bottle? After our counseling session, we drove home in silence. Our house in Lakewood was the kind of place we'd dreamed about when we first got married 22 years ago. Colonial style, 3 bedrooms, big backyard for the kids we'd planned to have. We got one. Zoe, now 20, and sharp as a knife. She was home from Ohio State for the weekend, probably rolling her eyes at whatever drama her parents were cooking up this time. Dad! Zoe called as we walked through the front door. She was sprawled on the couch, laptop open, textbooks scattered around her like academic confetti. How was therapy? Enlightening, I said, shooting a glance at Selena, who was already heading upstairs. Your mother and I are working through some communication issues. Zoe snorted. Communication issues? Is that what we're calling it now? What's that supposed to mean? My daughter closed her laptop and looked at me with those green eyes she'd inherited from her mother. Dad, I'm not blind. Mom's been acting weird for months. All those late nights, the new clothes, the way she giggles at her phone like she's 15 again. So I wasn't the only one who'd noticed. Your mother's going through a phase, I said, though the words tasted like ash in my mouth. A phase? Zoe raised an eyebrow. Dad, she bought a $200 sports bra last week. For what? To impress the other soccer moms at Target? Before I could answer, Selena's voice drifted down from upstairs. She was on the phone, speaking in that low, breathy tone she used to use with me back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, she was saying. Same time, same place? Zoe and I looked at each other. My daughter's expression was a mixture of embarrassment and anger that I recognized all too well. It was the same look I'd been wearing for weeks. Dad, Zoe said quietly, you know what's going on, right? I nodded. I'm starting to get the picture. That night, after Selena had gone to bed early with a headache, I sat in my home office and did what any self-respecting insurance investigator would do. I investigated. Selena's credit card statements told an interesting story. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. A hotel room in downtown Cleveland, just for an afternoon according to the timestamp. And lots of charges at Peak Performance Gym, way more than a basic membership should cost. I pulled up the gym's website. Peak Performance specialized in personal training. Their staff page showed a bunch of muscled 20-somethings with names like Tyler and Brandon and Justin Hale. 29 years old, certified personal trainer, specializing in one-on-one intensive sessions. His bio photo showed a guy with the kind of abs you see on fitness magazines and the kind of smile that probably made middle-aged housewives forget they had husbands. I stared at his picture for a long time, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This was him. This was the reason my wife of 22 years had suddenly developed a passion for fitness. This was why she came home from the gym glowing and energized, like she'd found some new source of vitality. My phone buzzed. A text from my buddy Troy, who worked with me at Midwest Insurance and used to be a cop before he got tired of dealing with Cleveland's finest specimens of humanity. Beer tomorrow? You sound like you need it. I texted back, rain check, I've got some research to do. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was in bed reading a Raymond Chandler novel and trying to ignore Selena's emergency work call that had her whispering into her phone in the bathroom. Daddy? Zoe's voice was shaky, scared. We need you to come get us. I sat up, instantly alert. Where are you? What's wrong? I don't know exactly where we are. Some industrial area near downtown. There are these guys, and they won't let us leave, and Mom is freaking out. What guys? Zoe, what the hell's going on? Just come, okay? I'm sending you our location. And Dad, hurry. The line went dead. My phone pinged with a location pin. Some godforsaken stretch of warehouses and abandoned factories on Cleveland's east side. The kind of place where people went to buy drugs or dump bodies. I threw on clothes and grabbed my keys, my mind racing. What the hell had Selena gotten our daughter into? The drive took 25 minutes through empty streets. The location led me to a cluster of warehouses near an old steel plant. I could see a group of people in the distance, illuminated by the headlights of several cars. As I got closer, my blood turned to ice. Selena and Zoe were surrounded by about 10 men. Rough-looking guys in leather jackets and backwards baseball caps. The kind of specimens who probably had more tattoos than brain cells. My wife and daughter were huddled together, their dresses torn, makeup smeared. I parked about 50 yards away and assessed the situation. 10 against 1 weren't great odds, especially since the biggest guy looked like he bench-pressed Buicks for fun. But I had something they didn't expect. Experience dealing with Cleveland's criminal element, courtesy of 15 years investigating insurance fraud. I pulled out my phone and opened the police scanner app I downloaded for work, found the frequency for emergency sirens, and cranked my car's Bluetooth to maximum volume. Then I floored it. The sound of police sirens screaming from my speakers sent the group scattering like roaches when the lights come on. I skidded to a stop next to Selena and Zoe, threw open the passenger door. Get in, now! They dove into the car. I peeled out, tires squealing, as the confused thugs tried to figure out where the cops were. In my rearview mirror, I could see them running for their own cars. What the fuck was that? I shouted as we hit the main road. Language, Nick, Selena said automatically, then burst into tears. Don't you dare tell me to watch my language. You dragged our daughter to some cracked den in the middle of the night. It wasn't supposed to be like that, she sobbed. We were just supposed to meet some people at a club, and then they said we had to go with them and they wouldn't let us leave. What people? What club? Zoe was shaking in the back seat. Dad? They said Mom owed them money. Something about gambling. Gambling? This just kept getting better. How much? I asked. Selena was quiet for a long moment. 15,000. I nearly drove off the road. $15,000. What the hell have you been doing? It started small, she whispered. Just some online poker, then sports betting. I thought I could win it back. With what money? Another long pause. The home equity line of credit. I felt something snap inside my chest. Our house. She'd been gambling away our house. We drove the rest of the way in silence. When we got home, I walked straight to my office and pulled up our bank accounts online. The home equity line we'd opened for renovations had been maxed out. $40,000. Gone. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling 22 years of marriage crumble around me. The affair was one thing. Painful, humiliating, but survivable. But this? Risking our daughter's safety? Gambling away our home? Lying about everything? When I came back to the living room, Selena and Zoe were sitting on the couch. My wife had cleaned up her makeup and put on her best wounded expression. Nick, I know you're angry, but... Angry? I laughed. And it sounded harsh, even to my own ears. Selena, you just blew through 40 grand and nearly got our daughter killed. Angry doesn't begin to cover it. It was a mistake. I can fix this. How? By fucking your personal trainer? Is that your master plan? Zoe's eyes widened. Selena's face went white. You don't know what you're talking about, Selena said, but her voice was shaky. Justin Hale, Peak Performance Gym. Want me to keep going? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Selena stood up. Fine, she said, and her voice was different now. Colder. You want to know the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Justin. And you know what? He makes me feel alive again. He makes me feel like a woman instead of some middle-aged housewife, married to a boring insurance adjuster who hasn't touched me in 6 months. Mom, Zoe said quietly, but Selena was just getting started. You want to know why I started gambling? Because I was bored out of my mind. Bored with this house, bored with this life, bored with you. At least when I was betting, I felt something. And Justin makes me remember what it's like to be desired. I nodded slowly. Okay, good to know where we stand. I went upstairs and packed a bag. When I came back down, Selena was pacing the living room like a caged animal. Where are you going? Hotel. I'll call a lawyer in the morning. You can't just leave. Watch me. I kissed Zoe goodbye. You can stay with me anytime you want, sweetheart. Don't let your mother drag you into any more of her adventures. As I reached the front door, Selena grabbed my arm. You don't get to leave, she hissed. Not after everything I've sacrificed for this marriage. I looked down at her perfectly manicured fingers, digging into my sleeve, then back at her face. For the first time in months, I smiled. Actually, Selena, I do. That's the beautiful thing about free will. I left her standing in the doorway, screaming at my taillights. The extended stay. America on Rockside Road wasn't exactly the Ritz, but it had everything I needed. A kitchenette, free Wi-Fi, and most importantly, it was far enough from Lakewood that I wouldn't have to worry about running into Selena at the grocery store. I'd been there 3 days when Troy showed up with a 6-pack of beer and a shit-eating grin. And so, he said, settling into the room's single armchair, heard you're a free man now. News travels fast. Zoe called me, said her mom's been having a meltdown since you left. Apparently, Justin the Wonder Trainer isn't returning her calls. That was interesting. How do you know about Justin? Troy popped open a beer and gave me a look. Nick, I was a cop for 12 years. You think I can't spot a cheating spouse investigation when I see one? Plus, you left his gym's website open on your computer at work. Fair enough. I took a beer and sat on the bed. So, what's the word from the home front? Well, Selena's been calling everyone we know, trying to get them to talk you into coming back. She's telling people you abandoned her and Zoe in a moment of crisis. That's rich, coming from someone who nearly got our daughter killed. Yeah, about that. Troy's expression turned serious. I did some digging on those guys you ran into. Turns out, your wife wasn't just gambling online. She'd been going to underground poker games in some pretty rough neighborhoods. The kind of places where they don't accept IOUs. I felt a chill. How rough? Let's just say you're lucky you got there when you did. These aren't the kind of people who write strongly worded letters when someone doesn't pay up. We sat in silence for a moment, drinking our beers and contemplating the depths of Selena's stupidity. So, what's your next move? Troy asked. Honestly, I was thinking about just filing for divorce and walking away. Let her figure out her own mess. But, I sighed, but she's been telling everyone that I'm the bad guy here, that I'm having some kind of midlife crisis and abandoning my family. Meanwhile, she's the one who's been lying and cheating and gambling away our house. Sounds like you need to set the record straight. Maybe I do. The next morning, I drove to Arabica Coffee in Little Italy, where Selena's best friend Julie held court every Tuesday with the other neighborhood wives. I'd heard enough of their conversations over the years to know that Julie was the neighborhood's unofficial information hub. Whatever I told her would be all over Lakewood by dinner time. I ordered a coffee and took a seat at the table next to theirs, close enough to eavesdrop but far enough away to look casual. Julie was in full gossip mode, her voice carrying across the cafe. I'm just saying, Selena's been through so much lately, she was telling the group. First, Nick abandons her, And now her trainer won't even return her calls. The poor thing is devastated. What trainer? Asked Karen, another regular from their circle. Julie leaned in conspiratorially. She's been working with this gorgeous young man at peak performance. Justin something. Absolutely beautiful body. Selena's been very dedicated to her fitness routine lately, if you know what I mean. The women giggled like schoolgirls. Julie, said another woman, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm not saying anything, Julie replied with a wink. But let's just say, Selena's been getting a very thorough workout. I pulled out my phone and started recording. How long has this been going on? Karen asked. Months, since the spring at least. She's been meeting him at hotels, going on weekend trips. She told me all about it. Said she felt like a teenager again. And Nick doesn't know? Oh, he knows now. That's why he left. But honestly, can you blame Selena? Nick's such a bore. All he does is work and read those detective novels. Justin makes her feel alive again. I had enough. I stopped the recording, finished my coffee, and walked over to their table. Ladies, I said pleasantly. Julie, I couldn't help but overhear you discussing my wife's extracurricular activities. Julie's face went bright red. Nick, I didn't see you there. Clearly. Just wanted to make sure you had all the facts for your next conversation. You might want to mention that Selena also gambled away $40,000 of our home equity and nearly got our daughter killed by some very unfriendly loan sharks. You know, for context. I smiled at the shocked faces around the table and walked away, leaving Julie sputtering behind me. That afternoon, I got a call from Zoe. Dad, Mom is freaking out. Julie called her and said you were at Arabica, talking about her personal business. Her personal business? Is that what we're calling it? You know what I mean. She's saying you're trying to humiliate her. Sweetheart, your mother humiliated herself. I'm just making sure people know the whole story. There was a pause. Dad, can I ask you something? Are you okay? You sound different. I thought about that. Was I okay? 3 days ago, I would have said no. I would have said I was devastated, betrayed, lost. But sitting in my crappy hotel room, looking at the evidence of my wife's betrayal spread across the desk, I realized something surprising. I felt free. You know what, Zoe? I think I'm better than okay. I think I'm finally awake. That night, I called a divorce attorney. The law offices of Patterson, Klein and Associates occupied the 15th floor of a downtown Cleveland high-rise. My lawyer, Margaret Patterson, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in high-conflict divorces. She'd come highly recommended by Troy, who'd worked with her on several cases back in his police days. Mr. Ashford, she said, reviewing the file I'd compiled, you've been thorough. Bank statements, credit card records, photos of your wife's trainer. This is quite comprehensive. I'm good at investigations. It's what I do for a living. And your wife has no idea you've gathered all this evidence? None. She thinks I left in a jealous rage and that I'll come crawling back once I cool down. Margaret smiled. It wasn't a warm expression. She's in for a surprise. With the gambling debts, the affair, and the financial deception, we can make a strong case for fault-based divorce. You'll likely get the house and primary custody of any minor children, though your daughter's over 18. What about the debts she racked up? Since it was done without your knowledge and for illegal gambling, we can argue that it's her separate debt. You might not be responsible for it. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in months, the future looked manageable. There is one thing, Margaret continued. Your wife will likely try to paint you as vindictive or controlling. We need to be prepared for that. As if on cue, my phone rang. Selena's name appeared on the screen. Speak of the devil, I said, declining the call. The phone immediately rang again, then again. You might want to take this, Margaret suggested. Put it on speaker. I answered on the fourth ring. What do you want, Selena? Nick, thank God. We need to talk. We can talk through lawyers. Don't be ridiculous. This is just a rough patch. All marriages have them. Margaret raised an eyebrow. A rough patch? I said. Selena, You've been fucking your trainer for months and gambling away our house. That's not a rough patch. That's a Category 5 hurricane. Don't be crude, and it's not what you think. Justin and I, it's complicated. I'm sure it is. Very complicated to schedule hotel rooms around his other clients. There was silence on the other end. Then, you bastard, you've been spying on me. I've been paying attention. There's a difference. I want you to come home. Now, we're going to fix this. No, Selena, we're not. I've filed for divorce. The sound that came through the phone was somewhere between a shriek and a growl. You can't divorce me. I won't let you. Margaret was taking notes, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Actually, I can. It's called no-fault divorce. Very popular these days. I'll take everything, Nick. The house, the cars, half your pension. I'll make sure you have nothing. Good luck with that. Might want to check with a lawyer first, though. I hear adultery and financial fraud can complicate things. The line went dead. Well, Margaret said, that was illuminating. I don't suppose you recorded that? I held up my phone, which had been recording the entire conversation. Like I said, I'm good at investigations. 2 days later, I was back at my hotel when Troy called. You need to get down to Peak Performance Gym, now. Why? Because your wife and her boy toy are having a very public argument in the parking lot, and it's about to get interesting. I drove to the gym in record time. Sure enough, there was Selena's white BMW, parked next to a red Mustang that had to belong to Justin. I could hear raised voices before I even got out of my car. Told me you loved me, Selena was shouting. That was before your crazy husband started calling my boss and telling him I was sleeping with clients. Justin shot back. I parked where I could see them, but stayed in my car. This was better than cable. He's not crazy. He's just jealous. We can work this out. Work it out? Selena, I lost 3 clients today because of you. Mrs. Henderson canceled her sessions because she heard I was a home wrecker. Do you know how much money that is? I'll pay you back, Justin laughed bitterly. With what? You told me yourself you're broke. Your husband cut off your credit cards. We'll figure something out. We love each other. Love? Justin's voice was incredulous. Lady, this was just sex. Good sex, but still just sex. I never said anything about love. I watched Selena's face crumple. Even from 50 feet away, I could see her world falling apart in real time. But you said I was special. You are special. You were a great lay for a 42-year-old. But I'm not throwing away my career for some married chick going through a midlife crisis. Selena slapped him. The sound echoed across the parking lot like a gunshot. Justin rubbed his cheek, his expression turning nasty. You know what? Your husband was right to leave you. You're pathetic. He got in his Mustang and drove away, leaving Selena standing alone in the parking lot, mascara running down her cheeks. I sat in my car, watching my wife of 22 years fall apart, and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no regret. Just a kind of distant curiosity, like I was watching a stranger's drama unfold. My phone buzzed. A text from Zoe. Dad, Mom's been calling everyone, trying to get them to talk to you. She's telling people you're having a breakdown. Just wanted you to know. I texted back, thanks for the heads up. How are you doing? Better now that the house isn't a war zone. Can I stay with you this weekend? Of course. I'll pick you up Friday. As I drove away from the gym, I realized something had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something cleaner and more focused. Selena had made her choices. Now it was time for her to live with the consequences. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late October. I arrived at the courthouse early, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Margaret met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. Ready for this? More than ready. Selena arrived 10 minutes later with her lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Davidson who specialized in personal injury cases. Apparently, she couldn't afford a real divorce attorney. She'd dressed for the occasion in a conservative black dress that probably cost more than my hotel room, trying to look like the wronged wife instead of the cheating gambler she actually was. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Morrison entered the courtroom. What followed was 2 hours of legal theater that would have made Shakespeare proud. Selena's lawyer tried to paint me as a controlling husband who had driven his wife to seek comfort elsewhere. He talked about my abandonment of the family and my vindictive behavior since leaving. Then it was Margaret's turn. She started with the bank records, showing how Selena had secretly drained our home equity line for gambling. Then came the credit card statements, documenting months of hotel rooms and expensive dinners that I'd never been invited to. The photos of Selena and Justin together at various restaurants around Cleveland. The recorded phone conversations where she'd bragged about her affair to Julie. By the time Margaret finished, Selena looked like she wanted to crawl under the defendant's table. Your Honor, Margaret concluded, Mr. Ashford didn't abandon his family. He removed himself from a toxic situation created entirely by his wife's deception and reckless behavior. He has been more than generous in his settlement offer, despite having grounds to seek far more punitive measures. Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he looked up. Mrs. Ashford, is there anything you'd like to say before I make my ruling? Selena stood up, tears streaming down her face. Your Honor, I made mistakes, I know that. But I love my husband and I want to save our marriage. This is all just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. The judge looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Ashford, according to the evidence presented here, you conducted an extramarital affair for over 6 months, gambled away $40,000 of marital assets without your husband's knowledge, and exposed your daughter to dangerous criminals as a result of your gambling debts. Which part of that is a misunderstanding? Selena opened her mouth, then closed it again. I thought so, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Ashford, I'm granting your petition for divorce. Given the circumstances, you'll retain the marital home and primary ownership of all joint assets. Mrs. Ashford will be responsible for the gambling debts she incurred. I'm also ordering her to undergo counseling for gambling addiction as a condition of any future financial agreements. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like justice. Outside the courthouse, Selena cornered me on the steps. You destroyed me, she said, her voice shaking with rage. 22 years of marriage, and you destroyed me in 2 hours. I didn't destroy anything, Selena. I just told the truth. The truth? You made me look like some kind of monster. You made yourself look like a monster. I just provided the documentation. She lunged at me then, her manicured nails aimed at my face. I caught her wrists easily. All those years of dealing with insurance fraud had given me good reflexes. Let go of me. Gladly. I released her hands and stepped back. She stood there on the courthouse steps, hair disheveled, makeup smeared, looking nothing like the polished woman who'd lectured me about emotional availability just a few months earlier. You know what the funny thing is, I said? I would have forgiven the affair. Hell, I might have even forgiven the gambling if you'd been honest about it. But you lied about everything, Selena. You looked me in the eye every day and lied. That's what I can't forgive. I walked away, leaving her standing there in the October wind. That evening, I took Zoe out to dinner at a nice steakhouse downtown. She'd been quiet since the hearing, picking at her food and avoiding eye contact. You okay, sweetheart? She looked up at me with those green eyes. Dad, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy? About the divorce, I mean. I thought about it. Was I happy? It was more complicated than that. I'm relieved, I said finally. I'm relieved that I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to pretend that our marriage was working, or that your mother's behavior was normal, or that I was somehow responsible for her choices. But are you sad? Even a little? I'm sad that 22 years ended this way. I'm sad that your mother chose to throw away our family for a gym trainer and some poker games. But am I sad that it's over? No. I think we're all going to be better off now. Zoe nodded slowly. Mom called me today. She's moving in with Julie temporarily. She says she's going to fight the divorce settlement. She can try, but the evidence is pretty overwhelming. She also said you planned all of this, that you were looking for an excuse to leave her and you set her up somehow. I laughed. Sweetheart, I couldn't have planned this if I'd tried. Your mother's self-destruction was entirely her own work. I just documented it. 3 weeks later, I moved back into the house in Lakewood. It felt strange at first, walking through rooms that still smelled like Selena's perfume, seeing spaces where her things used to be. But gradually, it started to feel like home again. I was in my office one evening, reading through some case files, when my phone rang. It was Troy. "Turn on Channel 5, he said. "You're going to want to see this." I found the remote and switched to the local news. The anchor was talking about a gambling ring that had been busted on the east side. Several arrests had been made, including some of the men who'd been involved in Selena's debt situation. Police say the operation was taking bets on everything from professional sports to college games, the anchor continued. Several victims came forward to report threats and intimidation tactics used to collect debts. The story cut to an interview with Detective Sarah Martinez, no relation to our marriage counselor, who was leading the investigation. "We're encouraging anyone who may have been victimized by this organization to come forward," she said. "These individuals targeted vulnerable people, often middle-aged professionals, who got in over their heads with online betting." I turned off the TV and sat back in my chair. Selena had been lucky. If I hadn't found her and Zoe that night, she might have ended up as a statistic in Detective Martinez's case files. But that was her problem now, not mine. I opened my laptop and started working on something I hadn't touched in years. The novel I'd always meant to write. The story of a man who thought he knew his wife, until the day he discovered he'd been living with a stranger. It was going to be a hell of a story. 2 months later, I ran into Justin at a coffee shop in downtown Cleveland. He was working behind the counter, wearing a name tag and a forced smile. Apparently, the personal training career hadn't survived the scandal. "Nick," he said when he saw me, "look, about everything that happened, water under the bridge," I said pleasantly. "I'll take a large coffee, black." He poured the coffee with shaking hands. "I want you to know I never meant for things to get so complicated." "Justin," I said, taking my coffee, "you fucked my wife in hotel rooms for 6 months. It was always going to get complicated." I left him standing there behind the counter, probably wondering if I was going to cause him more problems. I wasn't. He'd already paid the price for his choices, just like Selena had paid for hers. As for me, I was finally free to write my own ending.